Hello, church. I want to speak very briefly to you about the church's response to government regulation, to not being able to meet together. And I want to right off the bat say, I am in the same boat as you. I long to meet together. I think God has placed this desire in all of us, and I will be fighting for the time that we can meet together. The question, though, is what's the right way to fight for this? And that is something that I am not totally sure that I know the answer to. In the scriptures, we have competing ideas right now. In our context, they're competing. On one hand, we're commanded and we're encouraged to meet together, to fellowship together. We see in the early church, they fellowshiped together. And on the other hand, we have a submission to the governing authorities. And now these two things have clashed. These two ideas have clashed. And I think that's we're trying to figure out what is the best way forward. One of the things that Paul does in Romans chapter 13 is he ups the ante and he says, the reason you are to submit is because those authorities were established by God. God allowed those authorities to take power. I've heard people talk about the fact that us not meeting together is a sign that we are fearing man, not fearing God. And I struggle with that because of exactly how that's worded. Authority is established by God. And so what verse 2 says in Romans 13 is, consequently, because it's established by God, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling, just get this, is rebelling against the authority that God has instituted. And so those who do so, those who do choose to rebel against that authority, they will be judged by God. It's not saying that we are never to rebel against authority. What it's saying is you've got to be very careful that that is the only way that you can show your allegiance to God. Paul then goes into all kinds of rulers are there to reward those who are doing good, to punish those who are doing bad. We know that not all governments are do that well, and he would have known that because he was actually in prison for preaching the good news. Some people would say that actually what Paul is doing here is he's writing to the Roman church, but he knows that Nero, the emperor at the time, the wicked emperor at the time, would probably see this. And so what they would take from that is that Paul is making sure that Nero knows that us Christians, we don't want to overthrow you, Nero. It is not to incite revolution and then take over the government. That's actually not our game. Our game is to celebrate and to spread the news of Jesus, who is king over everything, who is the eternal king, who, when these powers pass away, Christ will still continue. As a kid, we often had the competition who had the largest muscles. And that is not a new thing that we want to have the largest muscles. In fact, the disciples had the same thing. The sons of thunder, John and James, they had a little competition going, and they wanted to flex their muscles, and they wanted to say, God, who is greater in the kingdom of heaven? Is it going to be one of us? And Jesus' answer was, you know what, it's actually the one who serves. True greatness is humble service. We are seeing some governments taking a hold of this idea of power and running away with it. And I think Jesus would say, with you, it's not supposed to be so. This is not what we are running after. This is not how the church flexes its muscles. Romans chapter 13, in its context, actually comes right after and probably is a description and an application of Romans chapter 12. Romans chapter 12 says, therefore I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. It says, don't conform to the pattern of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And in that way, we're going to be able to test what God's will is for us. And then he goes into this long statement on what it looks like when we offer our bodies as living sacrifices. And this is the description of how to flex kingdom muscles. Be devoted to one another in love. Things like being joyful in hope. We have a huge hope. Melissa has reminded me over and over, where does your joy come from? Be patient in affliction. Be faithful in prayer. When things are going wrong around you, and even when it's not going wrong, be faithful in prayer. Share with people who are in need. It even goes so far as to say, bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Don't be proud. This is how we flex our kingdom muscles. That's a little bit different than the world flexes its kingdom muscles. And I think what Paul is saying is, let the government be the government. If you need to pay taxes, pay taxes. Respect is what they need, is just respect them. Honor them, then honor. If you need to wear a mask, just wear a mask. But ultimately, our job is to flex the kingdom muscles by loving and by getting out there and offering our bodies as living sacrifices. And he says this in the context of the last few verses. And do this, that means love, humility, service, sharing. Do this, understanding the present time. The hour has already come for you to wake up from your slumber, because our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. How many of you believe that? Yeah, we're getting closer to the consummation of our salvation. And so what he says is, this needs to go out there. And the best way, they will know you are Christians by your love. So all the more important now for us to flex kingdom of God muscles and not necessarily our earthly muscles. I say this wanting desperately for you to understand my heart on this. The church is actually just as much, if not more, about what we do during the week, how we show Christ to the world around us, than it is about us meeting together. And I say that understanding that meeting together is a great rally. It's a great thing for us to encourage and build one another up, an important thing. But maybe God is trying to wake us up, where we see the importance of our everyday. For those of us that struggle to be just the Sunday Christian, maybe God is showing us that it is an everyday commitment that we are making. The time is near. It's time for us to stand up and be the church. Whether that be meeting together, there may come a time if we are told to not worship the Lord, if we are told to bow down to Caesar, like Paul was told, then we have to stand up. But at this time, we are not being told that. And so let's be alert. Let's understand that the time may come where that might happen, but we are not yet there. I encourage you to flex your kingdom muscles this week. Find ways that you can bless others. Find ways that you can shine your light, that you can go into society and just bless the socks off people. Do I have it all figured out? No, I don't. In fact, I often feel very, very inadequate in this job. But let's seek to figure this one out. And let's be full of grace for each other. Yeah. God bless you.